Hi gangers, and beware the long arm of the law. While the real stars of repressive control of the masses in 40k are the Adeptus Arbites, they aren't the only lawmen in town. Enforcers is the name given to the various agencies that keep law and order on the planets of the Imperium, and with the release of Necromunda's Bastions of Law book, we can see just how horrible they can be. If you're looking for our book club, you can find it over on Arbitorian's Precinct House, link below. In the sprawling vastness of the Imperium of Man, order is not merely a virtue, but a necessity, the very bedrock on which humanity's trillion-strong civilization precariously rests, and the main goal of the Emperor of Mankind himself, back when he could walk around. The many star systems in the Imperium contain countless billions of humans, all living their lives on diverse planets. Hive cities, feudal worlds, agri-worlds, all separated by light years of dangerous warp travel and largely left to their own devices. The rulers of those cultures, the nobles and aristocrats, kings, councils, even very occasionally elected officials that rule each world in the Emperor's name, are free to run their planet however they wish, given the title of planetary governor by an Imperium that holds them, and usually their heirs, personally responsible for the world. But in return, they are levelled certain tasks to provide a tithe of materials or of people, as determined by the Administratum, to keep their domain safe from heresy or the threat of rogue psychers, to defend their planet from attack by Xenos enemies through a planetary defence force, and otherwise to generally maintain order, the rule of law, so that their worlds can continue to be productive members of the Imperium of Man. That maintenance of stability across the myriad worlds of the Imperium is a monumental task, handled by a stratified system of authority, all of which tends to emphasise control and compliance over any notions of justice. At the very highest point in that ladder are the famed and feared Adeptus Arbites. The arbitrators are the police force of the Adeptus Terra, the vast administrative body that governs the entire Imperium. Dedicated and notoriously merciless, the Arbites are a feared presence, both by regular citizens and by the rulers of those planets. Humans within the Imperium possess no inherent rights under Arbites law. Failure and incompetence are considered crimes punishable only by death, and only high-ranking members of the priesthood can expect anything resembling a formal trial. Their jurisdiction is the enforcement of the Lex Imperialis, the overarching imperial law, codified within the holy Book of Judgment and covering what we might call grand crimes against the Imperium. Overseeing that planetary governors regularly remit their world's tithes, ensuring the efficient rounding up of unsanctioned psychers and mutants is being carried out by the planet properly, proactively suppressing messages that foment rebellion before they can spread, and in those scenarios where a governor turns rogue or a major revolt threatens imperial rule, the Arbites are empowered to intervene with brutal force to restore order. The Arbites are empowered to do basically whatever they want, but their actions are usually confined to crimes that would in some way affect the smooth running of the imperial system. They don't really care much about murders unless the victim is a vital member of the Adeptus. They won't sully themselves with minor crimes like theft unless that theft undermines the ability of a planet to reach its tithe quota. And while they have a presence on every world and are incredibly well trained and equipped, headquartered in heavily fortified precinct fortresses, and often a world's sole direct link to the broader Imperium, their presence is often relatively small. While capital worlds might have an Arbites force thousands strong, other planets might only have a single precinct or a single arbitrator assigned to them, and the many petty crimes that occur amongst its population, things like murder, theft, abuse, or even slavery, are considered far too lowly for their notice. Instead, the day-to-day maintenance of law and order on any given planet falls under the remit of the planetary government, and the many and varied agencies that carry out this duty are generally termed enforcers. Enforcers are the heavily armed police forces of any Imperial planet, charged with maintaining local law and order on their specific homeworld and, by definition really, acting as an extension of the planetary governor's will. Their focus is on enforcing local law, whatever those might be. The Imperium doesn't really care, dealing with organised crime and minor rebellions, and ensuring that the planet remains relatively stable and productive. The organisation and the equipment used by these enforcer agencies varies massively from one world to another, heavily influenced by local customs, available resources, and the specific temperament of the planetary government. Some planets maintain sophisticated police departments like the hive world of Alecto, whose sanctioners and probators attempt to limit the actions of the world's vast criminal gangs. Ultramar boasts the famed Precental Guard, and other worlds might opt for systems of lone marshals, magistrates, or even delegate law enforcement duties to their planetary defence forces. This is all often much of a muchness to the citizens of the planets, who rarely travel and rarely understand the layers of jurisdiction in play, and many enforcer organisations deliberately model their armour styles and armaments on the vaunted Adeptus Arbites, which often leads to confusion amongst the general populace regarding the distinction between the two. But whatever form a planet's enforcers take, their actions rarely centre on anything like justice. Enforcers are the paramilitary tools of the ruling powers, operating solely under the authority of their planetary governor and primarily concerned with compliance rather than abstract ideas of justice. Their purpose is to ensure the continuous flow of tithes and materials to the wider Imperium and to crush any dissent that might threaten the stability or productivity of the world. They discipline, capture, and execute those who violate whatever the governor deems to be local law, usually employing extremely heavy-handed tactics to crush any rebellion or sedition. For most enforcer agencies, justice is often a mere facade, a way to make the established order appear fair and prevent widespread civil unrest, while their true objective is the ruthless suppression of any threat to the ruling elite's power. They are the direct, heavy hand that keeps the teeming populations of Imperial worlds in line, ensuring that the grinding machine of the Imperium continues to turn, and the enforcers of Necromunda are a particularly brutal example. Necromunda is a name synonymous with industrial squalor and relentless gang violence, a hive world located in Segmentum Solar and riven between numerous competing guilds, houses, and gangs. But like many Imperial hive worlds, its main purpose is as a colossal manufacturing planet, primarily producing munitions like las guns, autoguns, and bolt guns for the Imperial Guard, and also levying vast numbers of troops. The planet itself is a wasteland, its original environment long gone, replaced by ash wastes and industrial runoff from which massive hive cities rise, like islands piercing a toxic cloud layer. The population, believed to be many billions across those hives, lives under a harsh feudal system, all aligned with one or the other of the great houses, who employ hardened gangs to fight for territory and resources. The planet is something of a powder keg, its existence reliant on constant production and export, and its population reliant on recycled, synthetic, or imported food to survive. Within this reality, the Palanite enforcers are the keepers of law and order on Necromunda, with order undoubtedly taking precedence over any notion of law. Their presence and their reputation are designed to prevent any form of social unrest, the sort that constantly threatens Necromunda's cities. They're directly formed and controlled by the Imperial House Helmor, the ruling noble house of Necromunda, mostly sort of, there's a lot of plot happening right now. The Palanite enforcers are, in essence, House Helmor's private army, enforcing the Pax Helmor, Helmor's peace at any price, a promise that's made not to the citizens of Necromunda, but to the Imperium and to the nobles who inherit its wealth. The Palanite enforcers operate under two overriding doctrines that dictate their actions. First, to ensure production continues. Necromunda's massive industrial output is vital for the Imperium, and any disruption could lead to severe repercussions from the Adeptus Terra. That has happened before, particularly towards the ruling house. The enforcers are tasked with ensuring that production never fails and the imperial tithe never stops. Workers on the world are seen as resources, and any petty crimes like theft, murder, or any disturbance are brutally suppressed, not out of any sense of morality, but because they could cause unrest or disrupt essential production quotas. In order to do this, the captains and sergeants of Palanite enforcer patrols are granted a very wide remit, empowered to use any means, including conspiracy and unremitting police brutality, to achieve those goals. The objective is very simple. The output must continue whatever the cost in lives or suffering. And then secondly, their job is to protect the noble houses. The ruling noble houses, including House Helm, inhabit the opulent spire, keenly aware that the billions in the hive city below vastly outnumber them. The Palanite enforcers act as the primary bulwark against that restless mob, quelling any hint of rebellion or recidivism with fear and usually overwhelming force. For the average citizen within Hive City, the enforcers' presence might offer a semblance of law and order, safeguarding them from common criminal unrest. However, that is largely a byproduct. Any justice seen serves to rationalise and legitimise the enforcers' tactics, presenting the established order as a natural and fair way to prevent widespread civil unrest. That utilitarian approach to law enforcement becomes even more pronounced and extreme in the bad zones and in the underhive, the deepest, most dangerous and least regulated layers of Necromunda's hives. In those lawless depths, direct control from noble or clan houses is often very tenuous. Enforcer precincts in the underhive are given a huge leeway, often operating as little more than another gang, engaging in skirmishes and raids against other actual gangs, just with heavier weaponry and significantly less oversight. They're even known to form alliances with local gangs, rewarding any who might assist them in patrols or on the hunt for fugitives. As you can imagine, there's a colossal amount of corruption within the ranks of the Palanite, especially in the more remote parts of the hive, where the lines between law enforcement and just more criminality blur almost entirely, precincts acting as independent factions vying for control and resources. To their masters in the Spire, of course, this is all happily overlooked, as long as the enforcers remain loyal and suppress anything that might destabilise their grip on power. The history of the enforcers is linked to the turbulent past of Necromunda and to the rise of the Imperial House Helmore. The story begins in early M34, with the original unification of Necromunda in the era of the Great Road War. Before this time, Necromunda was a patchwork of individual gang kingdoms and petty warlords who fought over the planet's struggling resources. The world, of course, still was considered imperial, but the endless open warfare meant that tithes required by the Imperium couldn't be met consistently, and the response was predictable. Punishment armies arrived, intent on wiping out the warlords until a suitable governor could be found. Their initial candidate, once many of those warlords had been killed, was Heir Siberia, but he refused the title and continued his fight against the Imperium until his rebellion was in turn put down. Not by the Imperium this time, but by a rival gang leader called Martek Hellmeyer. Hellmeyer eagerly accepted the role of planetary governor on the proviso that his line bring unity to the planet within 100 years, and he embarked on a campaign he called the Great Road War. Nomad gangs were suppressed, mutants in the wastes eradicated, and control over all the hives solidified, eventually establishing the house system, the noble and clan houses that rule the various industries of the planet to this day. During this era, Martek's chief enforcer was known as the Lone Marshal, a mysterious figure dedicated to protecting Martek's life. He played a pivotal role in connecting Necromunda's sprawling cities, lining the roads with the burned bodies of those who refused to fall in line. The Lone Marshal and his followers engaged in blood-soaked campaigns, vanquishing gangs and hive scum and eventually establishing a brutal form of control over the wastelands. Upon Martek Hellmeyer's death, his son, Harkler Hellmeyer, established the Imperial House and then founded the Palanite Guard from a core of the Lone Marshal's followers. We don't know where that name comes from, but the capital group of hives on the planet are named the Palatine Cluster, which is actually a different word, so maybe those early bodyguards didn't spell good. Who knows? Anyway, the Palanite Guard functioned as Harkler's personal bodyguard and as a band of vigilantes to do his bidding. Their primary mandate was to protect the Hellmeyer line and to safeguard its interests, leading to widespread discontent and sometimes open rebellion against the other noble houses. And this only escalated. Harkler responded to that discontent by granting the Palanite Guard extensive powers, allowing them to act as judge, jury, and executioner, or if we heard that before, brutally suppressing any opposition and continuing to grow his contentious mercenary army until the era of the last true-born descendant of the family, Jar Hellmeyer, who, after creating a new successor house, Hellmore, found himself facing open rebellion from the noble houses over this colossal and now unwieldy and Byzantine army. The original structure of the Palanite Guard had never been intended for an army this big. This resulted, a few years later, in the swearing of the Oath Nobiles by the various houses, promising no outright war would ever disturb the peace of the planet again. They'd just do proxy gang warfare and industrial sabotage. And part of that oath was the formal incorporation of the Palanite Guard into the Necromundan planetary militia. Mollifying the nobles, this established clear lines of command and accountability, added a ton of extra ranks to the system, and transformed the Guard into what, on the surface, appeared to be a more legitimate force. This evolution into what eventually became the Palanite Enforcers began with the establishment of planetary militia outposts across Necromunda in all of the hives, operating independently to maintain order within their sector. These first enforcers were the closest Necromunda ever got to a police force, with each garrison responsible for a specific area of their hive. However, those isolated precincts quickly became susceptible to corruption and to prioritizing their local industrial quota over any actual crime against the ruling house. And because they operated independently, they could even be swayed into the succession conflicts of the ruling house. The Two-Faced War was a civil conflict that saw enforcer precincts split their loyalties between Lord Gothrul Hellmore and the other claimant, Lady Cinderak Hellmore. This internal strife devastated the precincts, and any enforcement of order ceased to be as effective as precinct fought against other precincts. When the war was over, Lady Cinderak, upon taking leadership, commissioned a new rank, Lord Provost Marshal, and a number below him, to lead the enforcers overall and reorganize them from a series of independent precincts into a more effective and united force. With, no ulterior motive at all. The reforms brought in after the Two-Faced War redirected the efforts of the enforcers away from their own internal power struggles and outwards across the planet, cannily offering new opportunities. The enforcers were reorganized once again and given tasks they hadn't held since the days of the Lone Marshal, bringing the fist of House Hellmore down upon the Ash Wastes and establishing roadside garrisons across the whole planet, not just the Hive Seas. The Palanite enforcers operate under a stringent hierarchical command structure inherited from those reforms and designed to allow local precincts some leeway while still placing them under the firm control of their masters. At the apex of the enforcers' chain of command is the Lord Provost Marshal. That individual is directly accountable to Lord Hellmore for all enforcer operations across Necromunda. The current Lord Provost Marshal is Mylock Arroyal, famed for his charming and diplomatic approach, something quite unusual amongst enforcers, and shaped by a career spanning the vast criminal underworld of Necromunda. Below the Lord Provost Marshal, the command structure descends through several other tiers of Provost Marshal. The general rank of Provost Marshal was the highest attainable before the reforms, so rather than enduring the bureaucracy of creating whole new ranks above it, new versions of Provost Marshals were created. Immediately below the Lord Provost Marshal are a number of Prefect Provost Marshals, each with control over a whole prefecture of the planet, and then below them is the original rank, the Provost Marshal, now as them responsible for the overall operation of an entire hive or of a significant area within a hive. The duties of all those marshals tend to be quite high above those of any individual patrol and require an amount of politicking to enforce. They involve balancing the protection of the nobility, ensuring the imperial tithe, often navigating the complex bureaucracy of the system to implement Lord Hellmore's edicts. Below the Provost Marshal rank are Proctors, short for Protector. Proctors are the commanding officers of individual precinct fortresses, which are dotted throughout the hives and across the planet. They exercise considerable autonomy, often ruling their specific sectors with minimal oversight and effectively acting as local overlords. They communicate with their provost marshals through a proctor majoris, a senior rank that functions as like the area manager for all the precincts in a given hive sector, typically held by individuals that are identified early in their careers as strong candidates for leadership. Operating out of these precinct fortresses are then numerous different patrols, led by enforcer captains and sergeants. Captains are also given considerable latitude in deploying and equipping their forces and maintaining order within their assigned areas, which means that different patrols might have very different specialisms and equipment. And then making up the vast numbers of those patrols are patrolmen, the standard rank of a Palanite enforcer. Patrols are constantly on the lookout for new recruits to induct into their ranks. Enforcers are paradoxically recruited from the very elements they're meant to control, criminals and gang members from Necromunda's lower social strata, who tend to display the requisite strength and initiative, as well as a stomach for brutal violence and the instincts to respond rapidly to threats. Many enforcers are also outcasts from various houses or families, effectively trading their previous allegiances for a place within Helmor's own. All new recruits undergo a savage training process, a harrowing regimen designed to break them and instill unswerving loyalty to House Helmor, and are generally relocated once trained, deployed to precincts far from where they were originally recruited. The equipment used by a standard enforcer patrolman is a simplified, localized version of equipment common to enforcement agencies across the Imperium, including the Adeptus Arbites. Enforcers wear a suit of flak armor, hardened by the inclusion of a thick torso plate and helmet, and tend to use a mixture of shotguns, bolt guns, shock batons, and mauls, and stun grenades. Enforcer shotguns are effective anti-crowd weapons equipped with specialized shredder ammo, though, of course, they pale in comparison to the venerated Vox Leggy combat shotgun employed by more august institutions. Unlike those institutions, enforcers tend to use lighter civilian vehicles of local construction to respond to any threats. Modified ridge haulers and cargo eights are common, as are variants of the Tauros response buggy. The organisation also maintains the standard cyber mastiffs used across the Imperium to aid in pursuit of dissenters. The mastiffs bred on Necromunda are heavily modified, routinely fitted with hard case armour plates, and programmed to serve in a range of roles, as trackers, hunting hounds, or watchdogs. A number of specialist ranks and sub-organisations also exist. Subjugators are the Palanite Enforcers' close assault specialists. Patrolmen with the requisite build and brutality are singled out early on for subjugator training and equipped with heavier armour and heavy vigilance pattern assault shields. Subjugators spearhead enforcer actions, specialising in forced crowd dispersion and assaulting fortified positions, and their role is a very dangerous one. Few subjugators ever progress beyond sergeant, and the job has the highest casualty rate in the organisation. The most stable captured psychers, interred by the agents of House Helmor as part of its tithe, are sometimes drafted into the ranks of the enforcers as haunts. Roughly equivalent to a sergeant in rank, the most useful haunts are usually telepaths or telekines. Telepaths, or psi-renders, to peel back the layers of a target's mind, and telekinetics, or bone crushers as they're called, to aid in assaults on outlaw strongholds. When not deployed, they're stored in hexagrammically warded chambers within the precinct fortresses and are fitted with psi-reactive armour and empiric dampeners to focus their abilities. At a higher level than that, scrutinators are a corps of specialist investigators of equivalent rank to a captain. Scrutinators are brought in for the rare instances where unremitting force doesn't work, assigned to uncover leads or peel back the layers of conspiracy. Scrutinators are also the rank assigned to keep order within the Palanite Enforcers' internal structures. The organisation apparently has a number of checks and balances intended to prevent high-level corruption, though of course those are only known internally and any investigation is carried out completely behind closed doors. Veteran enforcers, obviously after going through the correct amount of psycho conditioning, might even be hired out as bodyguards, serving as Palanite companions and charged with the protection of either a scion of House Helmor or of another noble house deemed worthy of close protection. And then finally, enforcers who are deemed to match the correct personality profile might be volunteered for sanctioner assignment. Sanctioners are a form of hulking combat automata with a limited sentience, programmed to be dedicated utterly to the letter of the law. Those lucky volunteers prescribed for sanctioner use are subjected to extensive psycho-conditioning before their brains are removed, modified, and placed within the armoured shell of a construct. These law-automata are feared by the gangs of the hive cities. They're largely immune to the sort of small arms fire found in the underhive and able to carry significantly heavy firepower than normal patrol, and that programming has given them a reputation for being particularly merciless. Of course, that's all the intended equipment available for their use. Service in the underhive, or in the ash wastes far from supply lines, or worse, in the lightless and lost bad zones, might seriously limit the equipment a given fortress or patrol is able to requisition. Bad zone precincts can be particularly isolated, leading bad zone enforcers to operate akin to just another gang, relying on local resources and engaging in more direct and often more brutal confrontations with the various gangs of their sector. The Palanite enforcers of Necromunda are an illustrative example of the broader philosophy that underpins law enforcement throughout the Imperium of Man. They're not simply a police force, at least not the sort we maybe naively imagine, concerned with justice and the rights of citizens. Instead, they represent a paramilitary extension of the ruling powers of the planet, ruthlessly dedicated to maintaining a brutal, unquestioning order at any cost. Their existence is a constant, stark reminder that in the Imperium, the survival of the state and the perpetuation of the power of the elite supersedes all other concerns. On Necromunda, that has always translated as ensuring House Helmor's absolute dominance. Necromunda society, like so many others in the Imperium, is held in check through that pervasive atmosphere of fear and violence, though of late, times on Necromunda have been interesting, and with the rise of House Aranthus in the wake of the Great Rift, the status and position of the Palanite enforcers might suddenly be a lot more precarious. The transition into power of the Aranthians led to a wave of punitive shutdowns of life support in hives across the planet, designed to bring the population to heel, and though the worst seems over, many precincts have found themselves suddenly left to fend for themselves, attempting to instill order and maintain their positions while being unsure of who their true masters now are. It's an unstable place to be for a legion of jackbooted thugs dedicated to the name of House Helmor, and how that'll turn out is as yet unknown. Thanks for watching. And if you'd like to hear more about the world of Necromunda or the Imperium at large, then there should be another video popping up at the right there. And of course, if you want to support the channel, there's a load of things you can do. There's merch, there's another channel with the Tale of Four Gamers and the book club on it, and of course there's a Patreon, a membership scheme, and you can just like and subscribe. See ya!